Good morning. The more I get to know God, the more I understand that He's so good that He has a promise attached to every single one of our circumstances. That He has an outcome that He desires for me that blesses me and glorifies Him at the same time. And that if I follow the path that He leads me on, if I follow His will for my life, if I pursue Him and I pursue what it is that He wants me to do, that I can receive that blessing fully, that I can actually totally and completely receive everything He wants to give for me or be for me or do for me in a circumstance of my life. And it has been an incredible journey of learning and understanding that. Do you know that about God in your life? Do you know that every single circumstance in your life has a promise from Him attached to it, and He wants nothing more than for you to fully receive it? Do you also know that in order to be able to receive it, that you have to do it His way? That's the hardest part, right? That's the hardest part, is surrendering our perspective, surrendering what we want, surrendering the flesh temptations, the things that the world is constantly all day long, every day, telling us that we should be doing, and instead pursuing His way. But if you want the promise, that's how you have to do it. And He tells us about it in Exodus chapter 13. In verse 17, He says, "It so happened that after Pharaoh released the people, God didn't lead them by the road through the land of the Philistines, which was the shortest route. For God thought, if the people encounter war, they'll change their minds and they'll go back to Egypt." In God's wisdom, He allowed for the Israelites to take a longer route to get to their promise. He allowed for them, unbeknownst to them, they had no idea. They didn't know this was why God was leading them that direction. They didn't understand fully that the temptations of their heart would be to go back to slavery, to go back from where God just delivered them out of because of the possibility of war. They didn't know that about themselves. They couldn't see it, but God knew. So God took them a totally different path on their journey in order to get to the promise that He had for them. It tells us later in verse 21, God went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud during the day to guide them on the way, and at night in a pillar of fire to give them light. Thus they could travel both day and night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night never left the people. God never left them in the journey. He led them a long way. He led them a way that maybe didn't make sense to them as people in their flesh. The world might be like, why would you take the longer route? Save time, save money, all of those things. Let's get there faster. That conflicts with everything that we would naturally do by our flesh. But that's the thing. When we're receiving the promises of God, when we're walking in a journey to receive the promises of God, it is not by our flesh. It is not by the thing. Receiving it is not by the thing that we would do on our own. It is all by the Spirit of God. It is all by our connection in our spirit with His Spirit, following His lead, the longer, rougher path. Because inevitably, there is always something that God is protecting us from. There is always something that God is preventing in His wisdom of taking us on that long path that we can't see, that we don't know about ourselves. But He knows the depth of our heart. And so He allows us to go through some of those difficult journeys. He allows us to fatigue. He allows us to go through a season of maybe feeling frustrated about why it's taking so long. He allows us to feel frustrated about some of the circumstances in our life because He wants to draw us into His promise. He uses those circumstances when we pursue Him to bring revelation to our hearts so we can fully understand what it is that He's trying to be for us in a situation. And so then we can fully enter into the promise that He has for us. But here's the thing. We won't get to that promise if we try and do it our way. We will not get to that promise if we don't pursue God in our spirit man. Our flesh is not what's designed to connect with the Lord. It is our spirit. And so if we want to receive his promises, if we want to know his promises for us, if you've never heard a promise for a circumstance in your life and you want to just know one, we've got to be pursuing him in our spirit. We have to be trusting and knowing that he's never going to leave us, and that whatever the road brings, whatever the journey looks like, we have to know that when we're moving in it because he has led us there, he's never going to leave our side. We're not always going to understand it. We're not always going to like it. We may find ourselves wishing we didn't say yes sometimes, but he is faithful and he will never leave us. So be blessed today as you pursue the promise that God has over your life and over your circumstances. Thanks for watching.